Welcome to Whole Health. We're happy you're here on this journey of exploration with us as we learn what it means to live a life dedicated to spiritual, mental, and physical health. Before we begin our program, we want to share a brief legal disclaimer. The information provided on this program, including any health-related advice or discussions, is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any decisions regarding your health. Now, let's turn it over to Pastor Jeremy, Dr. Kala Kleen, and Brittany Pfeiffer for today's episode of Whole Health.
Welcome back to Whole Health. I'm Jeremy Higgins, and I'm typically joined by Dr. Kala Kleen and Brittany Pfeiffer, who's a certified nutritionist. But today we have a special guest. Tiffany Dill is sitting in for Dr. Kleen. Tiffany works in the local medical community and also attends Calvary with her amazing family. Tiffany, we're so glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode is one that I'm genuinely excited about because we're tackling something that affects way more people than they realize. We're talking about insulin resistance. If you don't know what that is, put your seatbelts on. We're going to get there. So whether you're struggling with energy crashes, stubborn weight, hormone issues, fertility challenges, or blood sugar swings, this conversation matters. So over the past few years, Tiffany's become a bit of an expert of sorts in insulin resistance and metabolic health. Tiffany works with patients every day to uncover the root causes of blood sugar dysfunction, not just managing the symptoms. And she's an incredible ability to explain complex physiology in a way that actually makes sense. But before we dive into the science and the clinical side of insulin resistance, I'd love to start with your story. Tiffany, what first drew you into this work, and how did insulin resistance become such a core topic or focus for you?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me today.
Yes, of course.
So I think, I've been a nurse for 21 years, and I had a passion. I went into nursing because I care about people. I want to help people get better. I want to have an impact on people in a positive way.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I feel like I have done that, and I did all the things. And then I started to reach a point in my life when I hit my 40s, and I started to find myself on that other side of the spectrum.
Sure.
I wasn't necessarily the healthcare provider taking care of the patients. I now was struggling with some things, and
so health issues of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so I'll remember exactly, I was struggling with my weight, and, everybody says, well, the older you get, your metabolism slows down, blah, 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 all the things. And I went to my doctor and I got yearly labs, and I got a phone call with the results, and they said, hey, your cholesterol's high. We need to get you started on a statin ASAP.
Right.
And that to me was like very eye-opening because I knew where that was going to head.
Right.
Not where I wanted to go.
Right. It's a road that none of us really want to walk down.
Exactly. So I said, hey, can I try to figure this out on my own? Mm-hmm. And so my training was never about lifestyle, never about food, none of those things. I was taught to treat symptoms. We prescribe you a medication. And to be honest, I never really questioned like getting off medications, but that you don't see that
right
in my field. And so it opened my eyes, and I started to do a lot of research on why is my cholesterol high? Like I started to ask those questions. Why am I gaining weight? Is this really normal? I see people that are older than me that look great.
Sure.
Clearly, it can't just be all genetics.
Right.
So I started to just do research on my own, and I started with a book called the Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, because at first I was like, okay, I have high cholesterol. I need to lose weight. Basically, that's what we're told. Read this book, and it was all about insulin resistance and how it's focusing on we get so focused on calories in, calories out, but what is our body doing with those calories that we're consuming?
Right.
And that hormonal piece of insulin is what dictates what you do with those calories. So calories, yes, matter, but you can't will yourself to not, like hunger wins out.
Sure.
Right? So
unfortunately, yes.
yes, every time. That's
right.
why The Biggest Loser, we see that all the time.
Right.
There's no reunion, right? Because it's all focused on calories in, calories out, but we're not focusing on like good lifestyle, hormonal, things
Sure.
like that. So I started there, moved on to a book called Why We Get Sick by Dr. Ben Bickman. And I don't know if you guys follow on social media, but he's big. He's a metabolic scientist and studies fat cells. And so that was the next thing that I figured out. And I started to incorporate some of these things into my life. And I went back for my recheck on my cholesterol, and my doctor was like, wow. And I'm like, are you impressed? Like, I'm impressed.
Right. I'd like that attaboy sticker. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I got started. I thought, my gosh, if I can do this, how life-changing would this be for so many people? Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing is we walk around feeling terrible, but we don't know how terrible we feel because we don't know how good we could feel. So.
Isn't that interesting? Like over the years, I think our society convinces us, like you're talking about, we're just all supposed to have slower metabolism, and our lifestyle should decline, our bodies should decline. And, obviously with age, that's going to happen. Yeah. But it doesn't have to happen at the pace that it is happening with so many people. And I think that's the thing that I've been learning so much lately, and something that I think I'm impressed by within this conversation and just your story as a whole. Like, you don't have to go down this road. I really do love that.
Yeah. Absolutely. We have a lot of patients that come in that are like, especially women, early 40s, we start to get like the perimenopause and things start changing. And they're just like, my doctor told me it was normal. And they just are just like kind of ushered out the door. They're like, let us know when you're fully in menopause. And they don't give you any support throughout it. And these women are all like, I feel awful. I don't think this is how this is supposed to go.
Yes.
And so, I love this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. So for listeners who are brand new to this topic, let's start with like the basics. Can you just define what insulin resistance is in simple terms and explain why it's become so common today?
Yes, I would love to. So basically, insulin resistance is just your cells no longer are listening to the hormone insulin. But to take it a little bit further, you have to kind of understand like how insulin works and why it matters. So anytime you eat food, the food that we eat, we need as energy, and it gets turned into glucose in our bodies. That stimulates to our pancreas to release insulin, which is a hormone. And insulin's job is to usher that glucose into our cells. So each cell has like a insulin receptor on it. So it goes to your muscle cells, it goes to your liver cells, and then it gets stored as fat. And so that's a normal process. Then your blood sugar comes down. Insulin is supposed to come down 4 to 6 hours later. But what happens with insulin resistance, and this is something that happens over time, is the cells no longer open the door. So the energy can't get in. So we're fatigued, we're gaining weight, we're hungry all the time. And then we start to have sugar in our bloodstream, and we have high insulin because our body is trying to compensate and save us because our bodies are so well designed. And so it releases more insulin. And so that's what happens is your cells no longer are listening to the hormone insulin, and you become insulin resistant.
That's pretty wild. I mean, it makes a ton of sense, but not necessarily for the average person, say like someone like me, the easiest thing to track. So building on that, what's the difference between insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and why do so many people miss the stages, earliest especially?
That's a great question. It's actually a spectrum. So it all starts out as insulin resistant. And the thing that, like I said, we focus on the symptoms rather than the root cause. So it gets missed often because we're checking glucose. But insulin is working. It's just having to work overtime. And so like 10 to 15 years. So it starts out as insulin resistant. Your body can keep up. It can release the insulin. It can get the sugar out of the bloodstream. But then when it starts to turn into pre-diabetes, it's not working as well. So then you have a little bit more spillage of the glucose into the bloodstream, and that's when you go to the doctor and they're like, your hemoglobin A1C is 5.7, you're creeping up there, we need to watch it. And then type 2 diabetes, it fully is just not functioning. Your pancreas is just overwhelmed, and the cells just are not listening to insulin at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just fully crashing around us.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And I would say the reason why it gets missed is because we check glucose, and that's a false sense of like, I'm okay. My labs are okay. My fasting glucose is less than 100. My hemoglobin A1C is 5.7. But if we would just check a fasting insulin, every year, you could see that number slowly climb. And that's called preventative medicine instead of reactive.
Yeah, we have patients that come in all the time who have had their labs done, and I never see an insulin ever. They might have a fasting glucose, sometimes an A1C. Glucose is pretty standard. A1C sometimes, but then it's along those topics. Well, their standard ranges are also a lot higher. They're like, oh, you're not at 5.7. Like, if we see anything over 5, we're like, we need to work on this, right? We don't want to wait till you're 5.6, 5.7, because now our body's already not responding, right? Yeah. So that is. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of a missing piece as well, like you talked about. Okay.
And that was a part of my experience, early on in my life, my parents raised me in more of a functional medicine environment. Moved to Iowa, had a hard time tracking down that kind of medical experience, and, just settled in with a local doctor, and, just kept doing my yearly labs. Everything's great. Everything's fine. And then I end up over back online talking to Brittany and Dr. Calla, and, they do some blood work, and things weren't so great after all, and I mean, my triglycerides were through the roof. My, LDL cholesterol, terrible. And it was a major shock to my system, because I've kept really good care of myself. I thought it was. And, a pro to that, a year has passed since those labs, and my triglycerides are now down in a normal level. My LDL cholesterol is almost normal, but it was like skyrocketed through the roof, So there's a lot of ways to deal with that. And that's why I'm so excited about this conversation. I think it really does matter.
And just to tie that in, because you do take such good care of yourself, it just goes to show, like, you can do all the right things, but if we're not doing all the labs, there may be hidden things happening that you're just not even aware of. Yeah. So that kind of leads us to the symptoms. So what would be the earliest signs of insulin resistance that people just aren't even aware of?
Yeah. So that was the biggest thing for me is, I had stubborn belly fat. Like, I was doing all the right things. I'd run 5 miles a day. I'd eat, my vegetables and
they were like,
salads.
You're just over 40. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. It's just like, this is just what happens. Your metabolism slows down. And I'm like, I'm one of those people that just does not accept that as an answer. Like, I just think that, no, not for me. So, so sugar cravings, like I was constantly craving sugar. I would have crashes in the afternoon. Like, I'd eat like a big, meal and feel like I need a nap. Those are how the symptoms start out. And I think that's what happens is you go to the doctor and they just say, it's fine. That's what happens. You're getting older. Let's deal with it. And then it progresses over time. And then you have high blood pressure. You have high cholesterol. It can, some cancers are linked to this, arthritis, all these chronic illnesses that we're seeing in people today that we're treating with medications, which, medications have a place, but the goal should be asking why. Why do you have these symptoms? Right. And the root cause is insulin resistance. So
can somebody be insulin resistant and still be like thin and athletic? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe are falling into that category that probably want to hear that answer.
Yeah. So I think that's the hardest thing is like, it's not just because you're skinny doesn't mean you're healthy. What's going on the inside? And that is when like there's a lot of visceral fat, which is fat around the organs, which is super inflammatory. And, that's chronic stress. We're not getting enough sleep at night. We're not getting outside in the daylight, even sunlight, morning sunlight, going to bed, not being in front of our screens 24/7, like all of those things like feed into this. And the way our modern world is now, we've just gotten so far away from like how God intended it to be, really.
Right. Actual feet in the dirt. Like
grounding.
I pray for this generation coming up right now, because there is such a draw to just be inside, to be in front of your device, to, and to get those young people out and, getting their bodies moving, getting their health, like, in check, it's not as easy as it should be. And so that's eventually part of this conversation. And we'll see that as we see their labs in years to come.
Yeah.
And hopefully, because we're having these conversations, people are waking up. I know a lot of like parents who are like, I don't know if you've heard of the 1,000-hour outside challenge, where you try to get 1,000 hours outside throughout the year with your kids.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's a really big account growing on Instagram where a lot of people are trying to do this. And so I feel like our generation is trying to kind of went a little bit too far with the devices and constantly inside. And we're like, okay, let's backpedal. And hopefully now we're teaching our children to have better limits.
That's part of why we moved out to the country, started our homestead. You know, we just put a down payment on a donkey last night. So
that's so cool.
That'll be fun. Have no idea what to expect. We got goats on the way. Our almost 20 chickens survived the, 47 below zero this morning with wind chill. So, but the whole idea was get out into the country where you have to work harder to survive. I mean, our son had to, there's a gate at our property that has to open, and there was snow piled against it. And so he was out there 7:30 this morning, 30 below zero with a shovel. Yeah. He came inside and his hair had been wet when he went out, and it was actually frozen, which was kind of funny. But don't tell me laughed. How do, hormones, like thyroid, cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, how do they play in with insulin resistance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think a lot of times we hear you need to balance your hormones. And so that's people go right to the sex hormones, estrogen, thyroid, all those things. But insulin is a master hormone. And so when insulin is high, it dysregulates all the other hormones. So really that is what's happening. Like you need to focus on getting insulin down. So over 10 to 15 years with these different lifestyles that we can talk about soon is insulin is high. So it's throwing off our thyroid hormones. It's throwing off our estrogen to testosterone. So it all goes hand in hand. But the biggest thing is lowering your insulin, and then everything kind of just like self-regulates. So
nice.
Yeah.
So for the data-loving listeners, I do love the data myself. Let's talk about testing. What labs do you think best detect insulin resistance early? Because if this conversation is as important as it sounds like it is, I mean, we need to start figuring that side out.
So like Brittany said, like a fasting insulin, most doctors, I would say a fasting insulin is going to give you the most information. It's hard to get doctors to order those unless you're going to a functional medicine chiropractor or something like that. I would say that would be the number one thing if you can get your doctor to order that. A hemoglobin A1C is another. That gives you a lot of information. That's like 3 months of what your blood sugar is doing. It's like a snapshot. Fasting glucose is most common, like Brittany said. But that just gives you like a 24-hour picture of like what's gone on. So not great, but helpful.
Sure.
And then even like a lipid panel. So they have, that's pretty standard too. I mean, a lot of people are on statin drugs because they have high cholesterol or family history, which was my situation. But, if you take your triglycerides and your HDL ratio and you divide that, it will give you a number. And so that can be a good sign. That can give you a lot of information of how insulin resistant you are. So, there's a lot of labs that you're getting like routinely that can give you a lot of information. And then more biomarkers, I would say, what's your waist circumference? Like that's something you can go home today and get a tape measure out. For a woman, it should be less than 35. For a male, it should be less than 40. If you struggle with high blood pressure, that's a pretty good indicator. Sure. A lot of people say stop eating salt. Well, if you lower your insulin, you're going to diurese, and that blood pressure is going to be one of the first things to come down. And then, your cholesterol is another one. And then if you just have family history of, type 2 diabetes, it does put you at a greater risk.
The genetic factor.
Yeah. And depending on your providers, if you specifically ask for these labs, a lot of times that they'll do it for you. You just have to kind of come in with the knowledge yourself and ask for it. That's what I found, at least.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being an advocate. When you know more, you can do more. And so that's kind of what I did with my doctor is, hey, like I'm gonna try this on my own. And I did eventually get a fasting insulin, and they just don't really know what to do with it because we're not trained that way. But yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Okay, and so this is where I think it can get confusing for people. How can someone have a normal A1C but still be very insulin resistant?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we talked about, how insulin resistance is a spectrum. And so that insulin is working. It's just increasing. It's increasing the amount of insulin it releases to get the job done, and so that's why it gets missed. Because if we would get a fasting insulin every year, you could track that number slowly going up. So I say your fasting insulin should be between 2 and 6. If you're starting to get to the 6 to 10 range, like you've got some like severe insulin resistance, and in the double digits, it's very severe. But it gets missed because we're not checking the root cause, which is a fasting insulin. So insulin is still working, but when you get to the prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, it's being overworked and it's starting to fail. So that's why it's missed.
Gotcha. How do you feel about continuous glucose monitors?
Love them. Love them.
Have you done them yourself?
Yes, I love them.
Explain that to me, because I'm not in the know.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you got to try it. I feel like everybody should wear a continuous glucose monitor. Insulin resistance affects everybody differently. So it showed up for me, stubborn weight, fatigue, high cholesterol. For somebody else, it could be skin tags. It could be, high blood pressure, whatever. What a continuous glucose monitor does is it gives you real-time data on what your glucose is doing when you don't get 8 hours of sleep at night. What is your fasting glucose right away when you wake up in the morning before you have any food? What happens when you eat something? How quickly does that glucose come down? Those are the things that you want. You want to see the trends. You want to see the spikes and how long it takes to go down. So it's real-time data.
So that's the deal that people wear on like the back of their arm. Okay, I've seen those. So how long do you wear something like that? So if you're not a diabetic, how long should someone like me, for instance, wear one of those? And like, is that poking a needle into my arm? And not that I really care at this point, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. So it tests your subcutaneous fluid. So it does not hurt. Yeah. Yep. And it's a sensor that you wear on the back of your arm. Typically it connects to your phone. And so like you can constantly see that number. And so like, for instance, like in the morning when you're first testing your glucose, you want that to be, standard healthcare would say less than 100. I would say you want that less than 90. And then, after you eat something, you want to make sure that number is not spiking up past 140, 120. And then how quickly does it come down to normal, which would be like 80, 100? A lot of people that have insulin resistance, that number, you're going to spike it. Let's say I have like Chinese for lunch, like a high carb meal. And I'm not trying to say carbs are bad, but we eat mostly carbs. But anyways, so if it takes longer than 2 hours for that number to go back to regular 80 to 100, you probably have some insulin resistance going on.
Okay. That definitely sounds like a useful tool. I'll have to talk about figuring that one out.
We like it because it helps with individualized care a lot. So we had Dr. Cal and her husband both did it. Well, we have a fiber supplement that they had started taking. Well, they both took in the morning. Well, one of them skyrocketed. The other one didn't. Where when they switched it and they took in the evening, the other one, they switched. So it helps you kind of plan like what is great for you. Like one of them has to take fiber in the morning, one has to take it in the evening. And that's how their bodies work. Yeah. So we like it for that because I can't tell every patient take it in the morning because clearly that's not what's best for some people.
Right. Yeah. So it's still good for you. It just has to be good for you at the right time. And so there's a lot of variables within all that. And I think that, it's a good transition into some nutrition conversation. I think there's a lot of fear and even confusion around food. Is insulin resistance caused by carbs? Is that an oversimplification? I mean, I know we've already kind of touched on carbs, but it is a big part of everyone's diets. I think in our home, we're trying to go more not quite carnivore diet, but less of that. But I'm certainly interested in your heart on it.
Yeah. So just real quick on the glucose monitor, you asked how long you should wear it.
Yes.
So I would say 2 to 4 weeks, just to give you a time frame to see trends. So that would be my recommendation. You can buy them over the counter. They're not very expensive. You don't need a prescription anymore. So very helpful.
Yeah.
So carbohydrates. Yeah. Are they good, bad? And I am
We
not
love them. They got to be good.
I know. They're great, right? So 73% of what Americans consume are carbohydrates. And
wild.
most of those come from a box with a barcode that is made in a manufacturer, like building. It's not something you can go grow outside and pick, and comes from nature. So with that in mind, and just the information, like the food guide, the old food guide pyramid, like the bottom 2 rows is all carbohydrates. That's where the majority of our food should be coming from. So I think that's a loaded question a little bit. So do I think carbs are bad? No, I don't think carbs are bad. I think if you are struggling with insulin resistance, you have to be more intentional about how you eat them. And so I always recommend to people, you want to focus on fiber. And so when fiber comes, like God created our food so perfectly.
Amen.
So when you get a carbohydrate from nature, an apple, for example, it's wrapped in fiber. The peel is fiber, and then you have the natural sugars inside. And so what fiber does is it slows the absorption of the glucose into your bloodstream. And fiber also tells you, hey, you're full. You don't need to eat 10 apples. Whereas like if I eat something with a box and a barcode, if I eat 10 Oreos, there's no fiber. That's what the food companies have done. They've removed fiber, gives the food a longer shelf life, and it keeps you coming back for more. And so I can eat 10 Oreos and still want 10 more. And so I think, when you focus on carbs that have fiber, I think the order in which you eat your food matters too. So focusing on whole foods, proteins, good healthy fats, and then having those carbohydrates at the end, I think is key. So
what would be one of the biggest nutrition mistakes that you see people make when they're trying to reverse it? Or maybe we can throw in some info on intermittent fasting and things like that too.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is people come to me and they're like, I'm doing all the things. I'm eating healthy food. I'm exercising. I cannot reverse insulin resistance or lose weight. And the biggest thing is snacking. So, and I think that comes with the food marketing is we want to keep our metabolism going and, eat this low fat, 100 calorie. That's where the calorie focus has really confused us. And so that's what people are doing. They wake up in the morning and they're like, I'm going to have a smoothie. And, even though a smoothie is healthy, it still turns to glucose. Your body has to release the insulin. And then they're like, well, my doctor said, I need to keep eating every 2 to 3 hours. So then 2 hours later, you're having a healthy snack, a protein bar or something, because we're focusing on protein. But insulin still has to be released. And the thing I think that people don't understand is it takes 4 to 6 hours for insulin to come down. So if I'm eating every 2 to 3 hours, insulin never comes down. It just keeps getting released. And when you do this for 10 to 15 years, that's how we've ended up the way we are. So I kind of got sidetracked.
No, I agree 100%. Our food sources have been altered and modified, and the food that is worse for you is easier to find in the stores, and it's cheaper, and tastes better. Yeah, there's all kinds of variables. If you go back in our conversations, our second, even our third episode were focused on a lot of those things. And that is such an important part of the conversation, because unless you can get control of those things, like I was intermittent fasting, and it was like, I'm not saying I was religious about it, but I'm not saying I wasn't either. And I was so conscious about everything that I was taking in, and yet I was having struggles, and then got my blood work. And even with the really locked in diet, my triglycerides were high, my LDL was high, and there was a variety of other issues. Sitting down and working through a lot of that with Brittany, leaky gut, and a variety of other things as well. A year later now, I'm actually down 20 pounds, and I wasn't even trying. I've actually added things back into my diet. I'm probably taking in more calories now, just better forms. And I have responded so much better. I mean, so how do you individualize carbs for somebody that is insulin resistant? Because I think that was a part of it, having to figure that out.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said, I think that carbs, there's a place for them, but I think we vilified fat and protein.
Right.
And I think, I'm worried about everybody's gravitating to protein, which is great, but you want it from the real source. And I think that makes a difference is you need to fuel your body. Like it's, like if you had a car and you only got one car for your entire life, you would do everything. You'd get the best gas, you'd do the oil change, like you'd stay up on that. And like, that's our body. So you want real meat. Meat is like same with carbs. Like it has a perfect ratio of protein and fats together. That's going to give your mitochondria, your cells what they need to function at a high level. So, I mean, I think carbs are fine. I think the problem is we eat so many carbs because like you said, it's at the convenience store. We have pantries. We have how many refrigerators? It's the easiest thing to
store. It has the longest shelf life. All of the issues.
And the other thing is we don't have to work to get our food. Like you said, mentioned before, like your son had to go out and shovel and do all the things. Like we don't do that anymore. So we're not even conserving the energy. We don't have the muscle mass like we used to. So I think carbs and moderation, specifically if you are somebody that is a type 2 diabetic, those should be moderated. Yeah. I mean, I would say 50 grams or less, and they should be coming from whole foods, vegetables, high fiber, things like that. Is that what you have to do forever and every single day? No. It has to be a lifestyle. I think that's the biggest thing too, is like, this isn't just a quick fix or a diet. Like, why do you want to fix your insulin resistance? And so I think we've gotten stuck in diet culture. It's like, I have a trip coming up. I need to
If summer's around the corner and I need to get into my bathing suit. I have a good friend in Arizona who, anytime his family, they just went on vacation, and he was talking about how he'll fast for 3 or 4 days before they travel. Like if you're hanging out with him, he's eating cheese sticks like they're going out of style, like fried cheeses. And it's like, there's a balance. They're finding the right balance is such a key factor.
It's wild. They use that level of dedication to. I could not fast 3 or 4 days. I just do not have it in me. But like, I would rather work harder for several weeks than not to. Right. Okay, so you talked about protein quality. What about like timing? So I think I've looked at some of your posts and talked about like the ideal order of like eating your food for digestion and absorption.
Yeah. So like I like time-based eating. I like focusing on real meals, whether that's 3 meals spaced out 4 to 6 hours apart. And then I would say focusing on fiber first. I think that's a micronutrient that feeds our good gut microbiome. It helps keep us full. There's so many good things. Our gut is our second brain. And I think we're just starting to learn some of that. So I would say fiber first. And then I say protein, and like, I love meat. I'm an Iowa girl, I love meat. So I think if you like meat, eat good meat that tastes good and then that's going to come with good, healthy fats too.
And from a quality source.
Yes, exactly. And then I would say if you want carbs, have those at the end of your meal. Because then you're not just hitting your system really hard with just all this like sugar, and then your body has this huge response. They've done studies. There's so many studies that if you do protein, fiber, those things first, and then the carbs at the end, you have less of a glucose impact, less of an insulin response. So yeah, I would say, and then time restricted eating. I mean, you don't have to go days without eating. Just take breaks. Your body needs time to digest the food. Eat in daylight hours. Like eat when the sun comes up. Like you should be. Honestly, I would recommend eating your biggest meals during the day, morning, like breakfast, big lunch, maybe a smaller dinner, eating like less close to bedtime because it takes your body time to digest, and really sleeping is for repairing your body. So when you're eating at 10 o'clock at night, going to bed, it can't repair, it's digesting food. So
I love that. That's been a big part of my overall lifestyle change, even going back 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to weigh over 100 pounds more than I weigh right now.
Wow.
And a friend of mine who wasn't a friend at the time, and I wasn't sure he was going to be the way he approached it, but he just walked up to me one day at church and said, you're going to die. And I said, well, I think we're all going to die, buddy. And he said, and he was probably 15 years older than me. He said, yeah, but you're going to die a lot sooner than the rest of us. And he actually owned a company called Health Quest. And he went, and kind of took me under his wing and helped me figure a lot of that stuff out. And I'm so grateful for it. Bob Matthews just was a real pillar in my life for a number of years, helping me figure that out. So, let's talk about lifestyle levers. Food's just one piece of the puzzle. What type of movement I think is most powerful for improving insulin sensitivity, and why?
Yeah. I think movement, whatever you're going to stick to, and so my favorite is muscle lifting.
Yep.
The more muscle you have, the more place the glucose has to go. And so that would be my number one choice. And then just walking. You could just, even if you do something as little as walking for 10 minutes after you eat, that's going to help with insulin sensitivity, that your body doesn't have to use as much insulin to get that into the cells because you're using that energy like on your own, basically. And then, HIIT training. And then, all exercise is good exercise. But the biggest thing is just move your body. It's a gift.
So HIIT training, high interval intensity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So walking right after you eat, most people, they eat and they go lay down on the couch, loosen the belt buckle. And, that's the typical American way, maybe part of the American dream. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense because you just took in a significant, amount of calories. And, if you can get those moving around in your body, get your body working through those, that's a really important measure.
And one tip that we give patients, because sometimes they're like, I ate lunch, I'm at work, I can't go take a walk. You can do squats, which is so.
I was just going to say that.
I don't know if you want to be that person in your office, but if you do 15, 20 squats, that's going to really help uptake that glucose. And so that could kind of, be a replacement for your walk.
Well, they actually did a study that it's actually better for you to do squats. So if every hour you do 10 squats for like an 8-hour period, it's actually better than walking for 30 minutes.
Wow. I recently started doing kettlebell swings and not quite squats, but a similar movement. And I'll tell you, it can wind you a lot faster than, because I work out 6 days a week and have been doing, muscle training for most of my life. But that's a whole new world. And I was actually thinking about bringing one in here to the church just to be able to have something during the day that would get my blood flowing.
Just have an alarm every hour you stand up, do 10 kettlebell
swings
and get back on your day. So earlier you were talking about just kind of the basics of things, and I wanted to swing back to sleep because I think it's way more important than people realize. So how does poor sleep impact your insulin, your blood sugar for the next day?
Well, it's huge. So you can, one bad night sleep, you can be insulin resistant the next day. It increases cortisol, which your liver increases glucose in your bloodstream, and then you have to release more insulin. It increases your cravings for carbs, specifically those sugary snacks, things like that. So, if there's one thing that people can work on, like sleep, get 7 to 8 hours, create like a routine, go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time every morning, like create those good, healthy habits. It's simple.
Yeah. And I think what people probably need to do in order to achieve that is create a timeline in your day where this is the no caffeine beyond this point timeline. And, I know that a lot of us, our days go on and on. I can get up and I'm 6 a.m. My day started and, I hit the road running, and it could be 8 or 9 p.m. and I'm still going, finally maybe just making my way home for the day. And so there are days where I find myself wanting to push into that caffeine area at 5 or whatever. And I know if I do, though, my sleep is going to it's going to be terrible. And so you start to bargain with yourself, drawing that line, just saying, I'm just not going to do that. And maybe I'll do the squats, do something else that will get my blood flowing. For me, has been such a blessing in regaining the sleep that I was missing out on for so long. So there's probably people feeling overwhelmed. It's a lot of information. And if people are especially new to the topic, it's probably going to be hard to, sort through. So what's one maybe underrated habit that improves insulin sensitivity quickly? Like, is there something that was like, oh, wow, I could, do this?
I would say stop grazing, stop snacking,
Okay.
stick to full meals. If
So
there's one
all of America, are you listening?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, sit down, eat a meal, cut out the snacking, wait 4 hours in between. That I feel like that insulin has to come down. And so insulin comes down by taking a break from eating, limiting stress. But
Well, our grandfathers and their grandfathers, they didn't, it's only been recent generation that have lived that way. For the most part, people worked with their hands, their bodies. I'll answer that later. For the most part, they worked, and it was physical labor. There were very few people with desk jobs. Nobody had a computer. Yeah. And so it was a very different world, and everybody wasn't just sitting around grazing and had a snack drawer in their desk. And so that's hard to retrain yourself out of because, we don't really watch a lot of TV, and what we do watch is pre-recorded, and we're very specific about it. But if you do catch commercials, it's all about grazing, and all of a sudden I want to eat a whole bag of chips, know? And so, it's certainly an area that I love that advice.
Yeah.
Make a plan, and if you have to chart it out, there's probably even apps for that, but wouldn't be a bad idea by any means. So let's kind of press into a whole nother area here, switching gears toward family and kids. Are you seeing insulin resistance show up earlier in kids and in teens? And what does that look like?
Yeah. So that was one of my concerns too with insulin resistance is I have 3 kids of my own, and I have a sister who's a pediatrician. We talk about this often as we're starting to see it younger and younger. We're starting to prescribe medications that adults in their 40s and 50s were on that now our kids are on. And it looks the same as it does for us adults, like overweight, fatigue, fatty liver, that's huge.
Wow,
we're
children.
seeing, and it's not because they're hanging out in the bars,
right.
It's because they're drinking high fructose corn syrup juice first thing in the morning, and they're eating these sugary drinks, and they don't get out and get exercise. So it's huge. It is affecting our kids, and it's scary.
And I think that's a really hard thing for parents to police. It's not the right word, but take control of, because for a lot of the time, parents aren't with their kids, and their kids are having to make choices at school, and they're making a choice for a drink. And there's some schools that even have soda machines and all these kinds of things. It's a very difficult area or arena to navigate, but one of the most important. How do we teach our kids good habits so that later on, they're living those habits out?
Yeah, and I think it's so important, and it's so difficult because, in our house, we try to teach really good habits, but I also don't want to hit things so hard that my kids have all this junk food on a pedestal. They're like, I cannot wait till I go to grandma's so I can have something and not a bag.
Here's a true story. When our kids were growing up, Devin, he being our first, we were very strict. He didn't even get cake, I think, until his 4th birthday, right?
Oh,
okay,
wow.
I know. Forgive us. Someone is judging me right now on the radio. It's fine. But even when he was getting older, we were very, we're not that family that has dessert all the time, and he ended up getting his own car. We helped him get a car at 16. He's out, and eventually I needed a ride. I had to get an oil change and so I got into his car, and we're driving, and there were junk food wrappers. I had never seen the kind of, it was unbelievable. But in all sincerity, I felt responsible for that because we had kept it as this thing, out of his reach. And, I was just glad that, when he got out, he rebelled into something like that and not some terrible thing, but it was and he's living a very healthy life now, he figured it out, and you got to let him do those things. But it does tell a story, it's easy for young people to fall into that because they stop, they get gas, you go into the KC's or Come and Go or whatever. And boy, what's there? The options aren't really healthy choices.
Well, and to just intervene on that, I feel like the biggest thing is actions. It starts with your actions and what you do. And so, and then just teaching this is fuel. Like, how do you want your body to work for you? And how do you feel after you eat certain things too? Just, having conversations. But I think fear mongering and saying,
Right.
oh, that's why I try to avoid, this is good, this is bad. There's so much that is around food, and so I don't want to, like you said, create situations like
Right.
Devin.
Right.
It's
a cautionary tale, folks.
Yeah. Yes. So.
Okay, so still in like the family and kids realm, this is one of my favorite topics, fertility and pregnancy. How does insulin resistance affect that?
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of women have no idea, and they're going in and they're not getting the labs that they need done, and they're having all these struggles when they don't need to be.
Yeah. So PCOS is a big issue that we're seeing now. And it basically is insulin resistance of the ovaries, and your body is creating too much testosterone. You start to develop some of these manly symptoms. You start to have, chin hair, acne, you're thinning on the top of your head, irregular periods. And a lot of the fix for that is, here, I'm going to put you on birth control or super heavy periods, things like that. Instead of just getting to the root cause. And it's like, goes back to lifestyle. It goes back to, have we checked a fasting insulin? Like, what are you sleeping at night? Are you, eating good, healthy foods? Are you exercising? Are you walking after meals? Things like that. So, I mean, we are seeing a lot of infertility issues. I mean, I see it just all the time. I mean, so many of my kids' friends are on birth control pills, and I mean, it's just, it's huge.
Which is such like a bad Band-Aid to put on top of things for teenagers who are like, they're just trying to figure, their cycles are just trying to get figured out, and they're not going great. So instead of figuring out why, we're just going to put kind of like, it's almost like we're going to push pause. And then in, 7 years when they want to start a family, they're going to stop that birth control. All those symptoms come roaring back, and we never figured anything out. We just kind of push pause and added some other not so great things in through those 7 years.
Well, and even on the flip side, like perimenopause, menopause, like people want to just get through, so they'll put an IUD in and just completely get rid of your period altogether. I mean, it affects men too, erectile dysfunction.
Right.
I mean, it affects every organ in your body.
That's wild.
So, yeah.
So for the parents that are listening, what can parents do, early on to support healthy insulin signaling in their kids without creating that food obsession that maybe anyway.
I think just go back to what we used to do. Like you said, sit down and have meals together, have full meals.
Yes.
Don't be scared to be hungry. It's okay. Like it's a normal thing for us to be hungry.
Right.
And even like fasting occasionally, I'm not saying that we should have our kids fasting, but taking breaks from eating like overnight, like not eating after 6 p.m. and then having breakfast the next morning at 8 p.m. Like your body is going through autophagy and upcycling and getting rid of like bad cells and things like that. So, I mean, really, it starts with you as the parent, modeling what a good, healthy lifestyle looks like, eating good, healthy foods. You control what comes in your house. You can't control what goes in everywhere else. So I would say, stop buying the sugary drinks and breakfast cereals. Teach kids how to make eggs for breakfast and get back to the root cause of what we used to do before, we worried about, fat and
right.
All the things.
Yeah.
So.
Aiden, our youngest, can make eggs like the best of them. That was the first thing we did out on the homestead. Bunch of chickens, and we now have more eggs than any human being has the right to possess. But we give them away like crazy. But even in the middle of winter, these things are producing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay, so if we want to talk about like some tools that people can use, what supplements would be the ones that you would recommend for improving insulin sensitivity? Like we use like berberine and fiber a lot in our office. Yeah,
berberine is great for blood sugar regulation. That's a great one. Fiber, always fiber. We are so deficient in fiber, whether you need to supplement. However you can get fiber into your diet. I like a yerba mate tea just because.
So you got to talk about this because Dan, I was talking to Dan Bushman, Dan the Dirt Man Bushman over the other day, and we weren't talking about this conversation or anything, and he was just singing the praises of this yerba mate tea. Yes.
Yeah. So I actually, Dr. Ben Bickman, this is kind of how I got into this. He wrote the book, which why we get sick and talks about insulin resistance. He actually studies this supplement. It's called the Feel Great System. And what it does is it combines a yerba mate tea and a fiber. And it's meant to be a tool that bridges the gap to help you get back on track to where you want to go. So ideally, we live in a fast-paced world. It's hard to get fiber. Like, I don't always have salads available. Right. Sometimes, and so it's a tool that you would use before your meals. The yerba mate tea actually is something that Argentina, it's produced it's grown, it's a leaf, it's like a tea. They drink it in Argentina like we drink coffee over here. And there's actually a lot of really great health benefits. It actually increases the GLP-1 hormone naturally in your gut. A lot of people understand GLP-1 as like the injections, the weight loss injections that a lot of people are doing to lose weight. The difference is that's synthetic. It's not natural. The yerba mate tea stimulates it naturally, gets rid of the food noise, helps.
And the side effects of those, by the way, for those of you listening, are so significant that unless you're like significantly obese and have such major medical issues that you need to lose that weight like instantly, they're incredibly dangerous.
Well, and I think you need to have some sort of a coach. Like, are you eating protein? Are you strength training? Are you doing the appropriate things? And what is your exit plan?
Right.
Yes, because we have patients who we have the in-body scan, so we can do the muscle and the fat ratios, the visceral fat, all of that fun stuff. And so we've just recently started to carry something that, like, if people are coming off of GLP-1s, because your body is now not making any, because you've been getting these injections this whole time, where it will stimulate, just like the tea, your own production of it. So because some people, that off ramp is horrible. They just stop and then they have no production at all, and now they just gain all the way back, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
Boy, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I know Dan was saying, like, with this yerba mate, like, he used to go into a Casey's and, he'd just be getting gas and he'd leave with a box of donuts and 2 pizzas, And now he's like, the way he put it was like food noise. Like the food's not talking to him anymore, and he's just like, man, I was like, gosh, I got to look into, I don't even have the weight issue, but there were so many other like health effects or values.
It helps detox the liver. I mean, it's a natural product that they've actually patented it. So it has 10 times chlorogenic acid, tea, that helps with the food noise. And I think people don't understand food noise until you don't have food noise too. So it's always thinking about, what am I going to have for the next meal? Or, I really want, it's like this war. Should I eat this? I really want this. I know it's not good for me. Things like that. It's just a tool to help people, because starting off, like, insulin is a beast. It does create cravings, and it's hard to overcome that sometimes. And so the yerba mate tea has just been a really great tool. And it's actually, a lot of people are using it, and coming off medications, reversing type 2 diabetes. That's the biggest thing I would say too, is like, if you can start small, start where you're at, pick one thing and just build on it. But you can reverse this. This is not a lifelong sentence. This is something that, if you are intentional, you 100% can get off medications. You can get healthier. Like, there is hope. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Circling back to the fiber, though, because I think this is something that people don't know. I have a family member who, I was at their house and they had their fiber gummies delivered, and I was looking at them, and it was 4 grams for 2 gummies a day, and I was like, 4 grams?
Yeah,
like, so could you share, like, what should you actually be trying to get in your day of fiber?
I think 25 grams is what you should be shooting for. So however you can get it.
It's a lot of gummies.
Yeah. I'm like,
and sugar, like, is there sugar added into those gummies?
There was at least 4 grams of sugar for the fiber. You're like, this is wild.
So isn't that like with most gummies, though? It's like the last kind of direction you want to go for intake of it. So unless you're just wanting to eat a gummy worm, like, and you just
feel
that's your cheat day or something.
Right.
But
eat it at the end of your meal.
Oh, I love that. So we're starting to run out of time. What do you want people to know? Like, obviously, this is an area that you've put a lot of thought and attention into. How can people? I love your social media. Would you mind sharing that so people, because you're always sharing information? I think that would be useful.
So I'm on Instagram at Nurse Dill. is my handle, same on TikTok. And I do try to go live occasionally on TikTok and just kind of do a demonstration and explain insulin resistance. And I have a whiteboard and all the things. So I'd love, feel free to follow me. The biggest thing is I want you to have hope that, it is reversible. And sometimes it can be a really scary, lonely road, especially when you go get those labs and they're like, you're type 2 diabetic. And they're like, this is just, your pancreas is broke. Like, you can put it in remission, but you can never reverse it completely. I think those are things that aren't true. And I think if you do these simple things, it doesn't have to be hard. I think we always try to make things so hard and complex. It's really not. It's getting back to the basics. It's like how God designed our bodies to be. They're so smart. I mean, and when we try to meddle in it and make our food and, it becomes a business and it's about money and all of these things, it gets confusing. So,
and that's really what brought us to this is, we're living in an age of, fast-paced and fast food and, workouts and, hard labor have gone to the wayside and, people are having a hard time navigating their health. And that's actually true in the spiritual realm as well. The encouragement, I think, from all of us is, get your spiritual health in order. Yeah. Because if you're not able to get your physical health in order, then you're really going to want to make sure that spiritual health is in check. You have a creator. He loves you. And you're going to stand before him one day and you want to hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant. While we're living here on planet Earth, we want to do everything that we can to honor him. And let's remember, he created these bodies and this is a temple and it's something that we're supposed to take care of, not where we store our trash, and doing everything that we can to make sure that we're eating the right foods. And, it's not going to be perfect. We're not going to live perfect lives and we're not going to have perfect health, but we can do the best that we can. We can be the CEO of, the life that we live and the spiritual, physical, mental lives that we live. And the Lord will honor us for that. Just to last circle around, I was asking Dan, how do I get this yerba mate tea, right? Yeah. And he actually said, well, I get mine from Tiffany. And I went, well, I'm going to be talking to Tiffany in a couple of days. So how do we get this tea then? Yeah.
So I actually have, if you go to my, one of my social media pages, I have a link that you can order from. Okay. There's a link and you can order off the website. It's from Unicity. They have other products that they sell. I focus mostly on the Feel Great system is what it's called. And it's tea and you drink 2 teas in a day and then a fiber drink. And
I'm going to check it out. I love it.
Yeah, I'll share my link and then,
Very cool. So hopefully you guys learned a lot today. I know that I did. Incredibly thankful, as always, for Brittany. Thank you for being here. You're such a blessing. Tiffany, we are so blessed that you decided to join us. Maybe next time Cal is unable to be here, we'd love to have you sit in with us again. Yeah. I'll tell you what, until we meet again, keep your eyes on the heavens. I believe the Lord's going to be calling this church home soon. In the meantime, let's do everything that we can to honor him with the lives that we live. God bless you guys.
Thanks for joining us today on Whole Health. If you'd like to learn more about our program, have a question for our hosts, or want to find past episodes, just head to wholehealthlive.com.